This is Scott Richmond.
And Arnie Sherman.
You're listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM. Arnie Sherman, good morning.
Good morning, Scott. How are you?
I am doing quite well. How are you?
Pretty good for a Sunday. I am looking forward to this coming week when we'll get the results of the special election for Congress between Rob Quist and Greg Gianforte. I'll also be thankful that we'll stop hearing all of the ads. I know you're not thankful because there's tremendous revenue for the radio station, but this congressional special election has spent millions and millions of dollars in Montana.
I know.
You know, and it's become a blood sport really in terms of how the national appetite has gravitated towards
You're right. We only had like 2 months off.
We had 2 months off, and it was a great 2 months. And now we're back into it for this special election. And when we first started this show, we made sort of a pledge that we weren't going to get involved in political campaigns. We were going to stay away from that. And we tried to and did stay above the fray mostly, other than the cultural and social commentary that you can't avoid. About the outcome of things because they affect you.
Living in the era that we live in.
Well, all politics are local. I mean, there's no question about that. And so we agreed for this week to bring in one of our candidates for mayor here in Missoula, Lisa Triepke, to talk to us about our aspirations for running for office. And then we'll bring John Engen in and have him talk to the sitting mayor of Missoula. And if anybody else, pokes their head up and, signs up and going to run for office between now and Election Day, we'll bring them on as well.
Right.
Because they are issues that affect our community. And even at the national level, people, for example, support the president against Obamacare in general until they realize what effect it may have on them personally. And then there's a different take on things. There is a lot of, cognitive dissonance between, taking a side, pro or con, on an issue when it's, sort of amorphous, when it's talked in, general terms. And then when you figure out how it affects you personally.
At the local level.
Or your own house level.
Sure.
And, of course, that's an issue that resonates the greatest when you do have a local election like city council members and mayoral races.
And you say at the house level, what's very interesting is having children of voting age is, especially my oldest son, when he came home from college and he started talking about the election, just to hear kind of his perspective and kind of what he's being fed or what he's hearing at school and his opinions. And, we're like, wait a second.
Right.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting under one roof.
Well, and it also is again the simplification of it. I mean, if you ask anybody who's for more taxes, hardly anybody.
Right.
Maybe no one is. When you say, do you want more policemen on the street?
Yes.
People usually say yes. Do you want a more trained fire department?
Yes.
Yes. Do you want the potholes taken out of your street?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you want more taxes?
No. I mean, that is a common phenomenon, an age-old phenomenon. And lots of politicians squeak their way into office, walking the fine line between the yes and the no on those sorts of issues.
True.
Saying that I'm going to do things for you, that are almost like Houdini-esque, And, we have a president in the White House now who, has claimed and claimed during his campaign running for office that he's going to cut taxes, he's going to do all of these magical things that other candidates also have claimed. And you're seeing some of the backlash from his own supporters, when they figure out that the Houdini-esque, masquerade cannot continue to be perpetrated
any longer.
Yeah, really. So we're not going to get into a political thing on a national level, but we are going to talk, even though I'd like to, given all of the travails of the last week or so.
No, but I think it's a good conversation, and we have it personally all the time. We talk about this. But for our air, we want to be able to present someone and say, hey, here's somebody who has raised their hand that says they want to go.
Right. We have somebody who is a novice in politics, Lisa Triepke, who has decided to run for mayor. She has claimed she really has no, problem with the current mayor, really. She says she's not running because she's against John Engen. She's running because she has certain principles about, again, the magical less taxes, more services, more transparency in government, and we're going to ask her about all those things. We're going to give her a job interview on the air.
It'll be good. I'm looking forward to it. Now, I know Lisa from our kids playing sports together over at Target Range, so it'll be quite interesting to hear the other.
Well, you can ask her about that, and I'm going to ask her about, I'm going to do the job interview.
Her kid's a good lacrosse player. Both of them are. Anyway, as is the daughter. So, look, when we come back, we'll have Lisa Triepke with us here on What Do You Know, proudly presented by Dawn Maddox, Glacier Sotheby's International Realty. Back with Lisa after this. Okie dokie, we are back with Lisa Triepke on What Do You Know?
Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your background so our listeners can get to know the real you.
So you've been here since 1991.
Yep.
Wow, 26 years.
26.
I can do math, by the way.
And how'd you get here? What was the precipitating event that led you here?
To Missoula?
Yeah, and don't tell me it was like a man or something.
No, it wasn't actually. He followed me.
Good.
See, you already got followers.
You already have followers.
He's not a follower anymore.
He's not going to vote for you?
He doesn't live here.
Okay.
But I grew up in Maryland, and I went to college in Ohio and went back to Maryland and after college and just knew that I wasn't following a direct path. And so I came back out to Missoula to get a second degree in wildlife biology and ended up getting a job at the Elk Foundation. So I never went back.
And where in Ohio did you go to school?
Dayton.
So you went to UD.
Go Flyers.
That's right.
This man.
I went to University of Cincinnati and Xavier. So
you did?
I know the Flyers.
Yep.
And I know the school.
Yep.
He just went to Miami U for a wedding.
A good school.
Miami's beautiful.
So you got here. You started getting involved in those kinds of work activities. And what kind of community activities went parallel to went along with that?
Well, I would say not necessarily parallel, but in different sections of my life, because I ended up, I have 4 children, and when I had twins, I ended up staying home with the kids for a couple of years. And when that happened and the kids started getting older, I ran for school board out at Target Range. So I was on the school board for 7 years, and then MCPS for a little bit, and had to leave that because I moved into the city. But that was kind of where my community service really started. I had worked with the Montana Natural History Center as well. And
so your 4 kids live at home with you?
They do.
By the way, give us a little background. Do you talk about the kids? Because I know these kids. They're all wonderful kids.
Oh, thanks. I have a senior and twin sophomores and a 7th grader, and they all play hockey, lacrosse, and run cross country, and I'm active in all those groups with them.
And they're great athletes.
So, did you discuss running for mayor with them, or did you tell them you were thinking of running?
I asked them if they were okay with it.
And what'd they say?
The three of them were totally on board, and one was a little nervous about the repercussions she might take on.
Was she the youngest one, or no?
She's one of the twins.
One of the twins.
That singles it out. Right.
So,
yes, it does.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. We won't mention her name on the air. So,
good player.
Why did you decide to do it? I mean, you had the conversation with the kids, but before that, obviously, you had the idea germinated in your mind, and obviously, it's gotten to the point where you're an announced candidate for mayor. Why'd you decide to do that?
Well, about 3 months ago, and I think it started with something on your guys' show.
We have a listener. Write that down.
What's that?
I think the mayor was on your show, and
right.
he indicated that every year he was in office, we could expect our taxes to go up.
Right.
And around the same time, he, and I'm not sure if it was joking or not, but proclaimed himself mayor for life. And so I think that the combination of raising your taxes every year and no term limits in sight, it's not a good picture for any of us. And so rather than sit on the sidelines and complain, I felt like it was a viable option to jump in and try to do something about it. And we spent about 3 months researching and doing diligent
research
right.
to see what the viability was. And we wouldn't be in this race if we didn't think we had a chance to win.
Good.
And
Well, that's good.
Good team.
I would like to, even though I'm not speaking for the mayor, I would like to clarify a couple of things about the conversation because I was conducting it with him. One of the things he said it would always go up in the context of there's an agreement with the public employees that he has to give them salary increases every year, and by the virtue of that, the budget was going to go up. Now there may be some other things that are more controllable, but that agreement with the police department and with the other city officials require him to give increases every year. The mayor for life thing, I think that's part of John's personality, and you have to always take that with a grain of salt. But obviously, during your campaign, and you will probably have opportunities to be on a stage with him. You can ask him directly about that. But I could see that led to your, as you just said, led to your interest in, taking this on. Let me ask you about the job of being mayor of a city. You're going to be in a position, if you get elected, you have a city manager, you have 12 city council members, you got 575 employees or so, roughly. You have boards and councils. What do you think about your experience, about you yourself, would make you a good person to manage all of that?
Well, clearly I haven't managed 500 people before, but in all of the volunteer and...
Well, 4 kids at home might be the same
that
thing.
That seems like 575.
Right.
The jobs that I've had and the volunteer work has all been the common denominator has been working with diverse groups of people and having a goal and going from point A to point B and getting there with a consensus of different people with different personalities. And I've been tasked with creating and maintaining budgets and meeting them and getting jobs done on time and on budget. I think one of my real strengths is surrounding myself with smart people who can think outside the box and come up with different solutions. So,
everyone has to manage their money for better or for worse. We're talking about, in this case, the $157 million budget for the city, through, I think there's at least 16 departments. And you're even though there's a city manager, you're ultimately responsible, and obviously the buck stops here in the mayor's office. I never hear anybody blaming the city manager for anything. It's usually the mayor, or giving credit to the mayor, or blaming the mayor for that sort of thing. You've mentioned the issue of transparency. Mm-hmm. Why do you think we don't have enough? I assume you don't think we have enough.
I don't.
I've never heard anybody say we have too much transparency, so I'm assuming you don't think we have enough. Why don't you think we do, and what would you do to make things more transparent?
Well, I think one of the transparency issues that I see is we are told as citizens different projects that we are going to do, and then we're told how we are going to pay for them, not the city. There's projects that are passed and to the tunes of millions and millions of dollars, and if we were to go to the voters and see what they thought about some of these projects, even informally, then we would actually come up with different ideas that might be outside the box. Or
give me an example. Give me an example of one of the things that happened like that particularly makes your point.
Mountain water.
Okay. So you don't think there was enough transparency about taking that on? There isn't an advisory board that oversaw that process. It wasn't covered by the newspapers enough. What do you think should have happened that didn't happen on Mountain Water?
I think that there was questions asked, and the words and the comments were that the constituents were asked, but it from what the research I've done that I've found is they polled 450 people in one ward and took their response off of that, not a general city consensus. And again, if we would have been polled, maybe people would have said yes, but we were never asked.
Okay.
What do you think about owning our own water company?
I think it's a done deal, and there's not much we can do it.
Conceptually, though, as a municipality owning its own water.
Many municipalities, as you know, in Montana, do own their own water.
And I'm saying this from a personal level. Not owning our own water never affected me.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I
can see rates going up now based on this. I don't know that we have the infrastructure in place to take.
Right. From my own perspective, my biggest concern about water, and the reason why I like the idea of owning our own water company, is having more control over what is a vital,
A lot of wars were fought in the West over water.
Right.
Right. So it's an emotional.
That's
issue
just
for a
my
number of people.
personal thing. So I have a good feeling about it. That's why I was always, when they were talking about the war, I think the way the path getting there may not have been the most elegant, but the concept and the destination is really where I personally wanted to be. So that's just me.
I think the thing that I and probably other people struggle with is the first financial figure we all received was $800,000, and then it's gone up to $94 million. And
oh wow!
And I think that
precedes me.
Right, and so I think that is one of the issues that, again, we're going to do this, and this is how you're going to pay for it.
Let's do a quick ID. You are listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO. Our guest is Lisa Triepke. We are proudly presented by Dawn Maddox, Glacier Sotheby's International Realty. Arnie.
So one of the concerns, as everybody, we were talking about it in the lead into the show, no one wants their taxes increased. Everybody wants all the potholes filled faster. Everybody wants to make sure there's great police department that serves the community. They don't want a fire that isn't responded to immediately. I mean, you always have that. I mean, that's just human nature. If we have obligations to pay employees in the city and have fixed costs that are going to go up and have gone up, and we're not going to raise taxes, what are we going to cut? Do you have some ideas of how do you get this under control if we're not raising taxes and we have manageable? There are certain things you can't cut. What are the things that you would look into?
Well, there's a couple of things. I think that by automatically saying we're going to raise taxes every year, that automatically starts with a budget that is some percentage, maybe 3 to 5% higher than the previous years. I think we need a strong management team that can come to the budgeting process with possibly 3 options: a 5% reduction on par with where we are now and a 5% increase, and see how everything pencils out and see how we can fit things in from a objective perspective, and maybe just not the way things have always done before. And I totally respect the firemen and the policemen who work hard to provide us services in Missoula. And I realize that the salaries are usually the highest percentage of budget, but I think that we can think outside the box, maybe streamline some overlapping departments, and possibly even retirement incentives for those who are getting ready to retire.
I mean, it is challenging. Sure. The Missoula police officers, the 75 sworn members of the Missoula Police Department, make $16,000 less than their counterparts in Billings, and $14,000 less than their counterpart in Bozeman. And even these increases that we've put in don't make us competitive with those cities, and that's unfortunate. I mean, you're paying the typical police officer $32,000, $34,000. It's not enough to put his life on the line, for the citizens of the town. So, I mean, I understand and I respect police officers, and I understand that, you're looking to have more accountability. Do you think that the managers in charge of the budgets now are not doing their job well enough? Or do you think it's the instructions they're getting?
I haven't delved into that. I'm not sure what the issue is. So I don't want to speak out of line on that. But I think that the budgeting process needs to be reviewed and again, more transparency.
Do you have
the whole
some
budget.
Pet projects that you would like to see done in Missoula that aren't being done or aren't being done well?
I don't come into this with an agenda at all. I honestly would like to see the unnecessary spending get under control and have more transparency with constituents.
Sure.
I don't have any.
And I don't want to beat this too much to
agenda.
death because I know you're not in the job.
Right.
But you've mentioned on a couple of occasions already in this unnecessary spending, and I'm not sure what the unnecessary spending is. Give me an example or two of what you think is unnecessary.
Well, you've got the bridge, obviously, that didn't have voter input, and we could have, again, if we would have been asked, maybe then that would have passed.
This is the bridge over reserve,
yes.
South Reserve?
Yep.
Got it.
And
that came from tax increment financing,
right.
though. So that had to be spent in that area. And maybe there was something else that could have been spent on, but
right. And it went over budget to the tune where we did have to pick up some of that, which could go back into the general fund. The purchasing or the takeover of eco compost, I look at the gravestones, them taking over, making the gravestones. There's just multiple areas where it seems like they're just trying. The city right now is trying to take over a lot of things that private businesses are doing also and spending money.
And why do you think that is?
I have no idea.
So you haven't gotten input on why those things maybe have happened, or
No, we're in the process too. Obviously, I just filed 2 weeks ago,
Right,
so we're in the
right.
process of meeting with different people around the city and different groups, the heads of Mountain Water and different
Right.
groups within the city. So that's going to be part of the process of the next 6 months.
Yeah, one of the things that you always run into in local government with the issues of transparency and getting more input and all those sort of things is it runs against a number of local people's concerns about the city not being responsive enough. Often when you build it, for example, on the Merck building, regardless how it turned out, it took a long time to get through that process. And that, for better or worse, could be used by a lot, and has been used by other people. So, see, the city isn't very business friendly. Look, I mean, if I was that developer, if I was Andy Holleran, I would have walked away from that project already.
Well, he has great patience.
Given all the steps you put through. So you always walk the fine line, and there's a concern, I think, that I think it needs to be clarified about building in more, reviews or steps in the process and trying to run something in an efficient, time-sensitive way. So I think that, that's important to consider as you delve deeper into, your, evaluation of what needs to be done, because later on, obviously you're only in this for a couple of weeks, but later on you're going to be asked those tough questions again.
Right.
And I think, just a word, not to the wise, but just a word about that sometimes what sounds like it's a good pathway to follow sometimes doesn't end up to be as constructive as it ought to be. So, whatever that's worth.
Well, that's the exploration that you're doing right now, is kind of uncovering those things that you do feel that are issues, and that how deep you want to go on them. That's the next 6 months, right?
It is, and I think that in some of my past endeavors, particularly school board, I think it's always the case that the closer you get to the inside workings, the more you find out that maybe you necessarily didn't want to know, or it becomes harder to deal with.
Yeah. It's like
what was it like working on the school board? I'm curious. I didn't know that. I mean, I should have known that, right? Because I was here when you were doing that, but
you only pay attention to yourself, Scott. So
I really, and my kids
why.
And how they relate to her kids. Let's be clear.
That's all good.
Exactly. No, they're good kids. They all play sports together.
So I think he's asking what you learned from your
the experience.
So the school board was an interesting experience. There were, in the Target Range one, which I served for 7 years, there were 5 school board members who were responsible for the budget and overseeing the superintendent. And
right.
And there were I'll leave it at saying I fought for transparency and accountability in that position, and it wasn't always welcomed.
Yeah, I don't know why anybody.
Why
would
is
serve
that?
on
Why
a
do you think
school
that
board.
is? I'm curious. Why wouldn't they want more transparency, especially to parents who are, who make up the board?
I can tell you, as an administrator, I've run organizations with boards of directors. You're hired to run the place. You don't want to have somebody looking over your shoulder and coming in once. How often does the school board meet? Once a month?
Once a month. And our role was really, honestly, to evaluate the superintendent and watch the budget. And we were very clear to not micromanage, because I don't think that was the role either.
Right. But everybody has a different definition of micromanagement.
Yep, exactly.
That's true.
Yep.
Yeah.
Who was that? That was what was the superintendent's name back then that we were working with?
Corey Austin.
Yeah. It's not the gentleman that left when we first, in 2014. Oh, forget about it. Anyway.
So I took over, in a past life, I took over an organization that had several hundred employees and was in the red, and the board instructed me to get the organization in the black. And on the first week on the job, I had to fire 28 people.
Wow.
So that was a very difficult and memorable in a negative way experience. If you take over as mayor here and you're trying to control costs, and there may be a situation where you're going to have to, can people. Are you comfortable in doing that? Have you done that before?
I am comfortable. I would say that, again, surrounding myself with a strong group of people, and there would be much thought to do it in as decent of a way as possible. And I'm not afraid of making tough decisions if that's what needs to be done. But I don't have any of the answers yet to answer that, because I don't know end result.
I had a
right
guy
now.
get down on his hands and knees in my office and beg me not to do it.
Is that right?
Aw.
Yeah, and that was very tough.
It's heartbreaking.
It was very hard.
When was this, Arnie?
I don't really want it because that would narrow it down, but it was not in Montana.
It wasn't in Montana?
No.
Let's do a quick ID. You're listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO. Our guest is mayoral candidate Lisa Triepke here in Missoula, proudly presented by Dawn Maddox Glacier Sotheby's International Realty. Arnie.
So I've read what's been written about, you and the campaign so far. You don't have a bone to pick specifically with John Engen.
Correct.
This is not an anti-John Engen, campaign, but at some time it might turn into that. I mean, it's just the nature of political. It's very hard to stay away from that. How do you plan to stay away from that? I know John well, and everybody does. He's easy pickings to not. It'd be hard to stay away from that. If I was running against him, I'd be all over that. Yeah.
I think I go back to what I said before, and it's kind of the way I live my life. I like to take the high road, and I think that this is an issue-based campaign, and I have a team surrounding me. We're all on the same page of this is a clean campaign based on issues and fiscal responsibility and transparency. It has nothing to do with personal issues.
Okay, that's good. I mean, and that's the way it should be.
If they only had heard that, if they only had thought that way back in 2015.
Yeah, exactly.
We wouldn't have what we have.
So you're going to have to raise money. How much money do you think you're going to have to raise to run a competitive race here in Missoula?
Probably about $50,000.
That's not quite what Rob Quist and Greg Gianforte had to raise for the special election.
Nope, it's not.
No,
that's not a lot.
It's not a lot of money. And this is retail politics, at its best, right? Door to door, you can meet literally almost every voter.
Yep,
you definitely can.
And we have we're working with people to get people out on the streets, helping us go door to door. And
you have a Fitbit?
I do have a Fitbit.
I'm glad you do. We're going to figure out how many steps you take every day.
20 million.
You should have it literally on your website, an update on how many steps you took that day.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, please.
I could do a challenge.
I'm full of promotional ideas. Yeah, do a challenge. Exactly. Right? Match these funds.
Have you talked to John since you announced?
I have not.
And do you plan to, or do you plan to have a conversation, or are you just going to just run your race?
Well, I'm definitely going to run my race, and if the opportunity is there, I absolutely will. I'm not running,
right?
To not speak
sure.
with him. We've been busy and not enough hours in the day right now.
What have you been doing since you filed 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago?
We've been meeting with different business people in the community and different organizations, and just trying to get out of them what their concerns are and what their needs are, and working in strategy, getting our marketing plan in place, and fundraising, et cetera.
Is there a common theme out there that you hear beyond your theme? I mean, you came into this with some notions yourself. Is that being confirmed, or are there other things that are coming to the forefront from conversations so far? I know it's only a few weeks, but are there themes that are popping up that you're prepared to handle and deal with?
I think the common themes, and they're kind of reiterating why we decided to enter this race, and it's the rising property taxes and, ironically, potholes.
Right. Well, potholes is always a problem. Potholes, snow removal. I mean,
city services.
Yeah. I mean, Mayor Blandick in Chicago many years ago lost a mayor's race to Janie Byrne, the first woman to become mayor of Chicago, because of street cleanup, essentially, getting the snow off the streets. So
bad winter.
Yeah, those are important issues. The tax issue is very tough. Montana has a limited amount of ways to raise money. We don't have a sales tax in the state. We're not going to have one probably. Maybe in my lifetime there won't be a sales tax in Montana. So you have a limited way, and it's levies. It's bonding. For schools and other sorts of things, and it's essentially property tax and business taxes that that run the city. Are you willing to say to Missoulians that we're going to run on a $125 million budget, and we're going to cut some things out, and we're going to be leaner and meaner, assuming you tackle the things that you want to tackle? I mean, you comfortable with doing that?
Well, I think, like I said earlier, if we get a strong management team that can look at possibly 3 different budget scenarios and pencil it out, I think some solutions might arise through that process.
Sure.
I do know that one of the other things I've been hearing is that new businesses coming to town, it's difficult for them for 2 reasons. One, because of the development process and it not being streamlined. It's more of a subjective process than objective. So depending on who you talk to, your process can be easier or not. And
what's the second one? Oh.
Well, I mean, there are issues related to this notion. I'm a business person now. I'm a lender to the old sawmill district project, which is $150 million worth of real estate. This town. I mean, every city has its bureaucracy getting things done, and that bureaucracy, by and large, was put in place because people wanted more transparency and more steps, and not to have it happen all behind closed doors.
Right.
Well,
I'm just gonna say, when I was in Chicago, this is in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. You wanted to get a zoning approval to put an addition on your house. You put $5,000 in an envelope and stuck it in your ward alderman's desk, and that's how it got done. And obviously we don't want that to happen here. Clearly, on the other hand, transparency and building more steps in leads to the very outcome that you're trying in some ways to avoid, which is being viewed as not being business friendly. I think Missoula is very business friendly, but I do think there are, processes in place and individuals you have to deal with in the process that have their own preconceived notions about things.
Well, the second point of that was in talking to some different people that were trying to move their businesses in town.
Right.
The skyrocketing housing prices prevented them from their employees being able to find affordable housing, and that's an issue.
And again, as a mayoral candidate, it's a tough issue. We have low wages. Wages haven't gone up. Building materials cost what building materials cost. And you can go to the Midwest where materials are easier to get in some ways, and building costs are less per square foot. You go to California where they're maybe twice as much. You can't build for what you build here for, and it's a tough issue, affordable housing. I mean, you don't want to. The city's not going to subsidize the construction. They're not going to go out and say, you're going to build for $80 a square foot, and we're going to pay the difference. You can't really do that. So it is a tough issue to try to figure out. It's more on the wage side of things that have to be attacked and adjusted rather than.
Well, doesn't that also happen as you attract? It's like a chicken and the egg. You attract more business to town, and you create greater competition for the workforce, and you create higher wage jobs, right?
In theory,
then everybody needs to kind of step up their game a bit.
In theory, unless there's a bit of collusion going on, and I think, Missoula does have relatively speaking to Montana, when you take the 6 or 7 urban areas, they're higher than the more rural counties, in Montana, but we're still not anywhere near, where we ought to be.
Right, of course.
And it's hard. Some businesses come here so they can pay their employees less. They're going to grab a graduate out of the university and they're going to pay them less. Teachers here make less. Construction workers make less. Police officers.
That's why I like working with salespeople, because they create their own salaries.
The cost of what a refrigerator costs, what a television costs, what flooring costs is going up, and it's hard to legislate. Something that's going to affect that. I mean, you do have some requirements for affordable housing. The new Riverfront Triangle project has been asked to put in X amount of units of affordable housing, and a project like that they've agreed to do it. I don't know if it's 26 or 28 units. That's more affordable. I don't really know what that means. When you look at an ongoing market, a global, U.S. marketplace. So it is a tough issue.
It sure is. You are listening to What Do You Know? Newstalk KGVO. Our guest is Lisa Triepke. Here, we are proudly presented by Dawn Maddox Glacier Sotheby's International Realty.
So you've said a couple of times, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, you've said a couple of times, put a management team in who can do, crunch the numbers, do what's necessary. Mm-hmm. To me, that implies that you don't think the management team that's in place is doing the job they ought to be doing.
I'm not going to go out and say that, because I would just say I'm good at surrounding myself with a qualified team, and so that's what I would do. I'm not dissing what specific people are doing.
I mean, you've looked. Do you think, for example, I mean, you've seen the city budget. I would assume you've looked at the city budget the last year or so. Was it easy to understand? Was it easy to look at it and figure out maybe some of the things that you might want to do? Because there's one thing, as you know, people telling you got to do this, and that we got to cut taxes, we got to make business processes easier, we have to eliminate overlap, and then taking a look at the budget and what's in place and trying to make that happen. That's I can tell that from personal experience. That's really challenging. I had an organization that had a $4 million budget a long time ago with 200 employees, and the board said you got to cut $500,000. Either raise it or cut it immediately.
Ugh.
And
It's hard.
It's a hard thing as a new person coming in to try to figure out how to do that. You go and ask all your internal people, and they're going to defend their turf. You ask external people, and some of them have their own.
Managing a business is tough. I mean,
Sure.
I can't imagine what it's like to manage a city, but managing a business is very tough. We both do it here in town, and I got 25 people working for me.
The big difference in what you have to do is when you run your own business, you can also try to raise revenue.
Right.
You can cut the cost of your
Well, you
product.
always try to.
You can stop advertising on the radio station.
Don't do that.
You can cut a better deal with.
Is this mic on?
Right, but
Shut his mic off.
But in running, government, you know what your tax base is going to generate, and you have to, you plan around that.
I think my point is that with and like you're referring to a good key management team, I think that there's options to look at it with fresh eyes and think outside the box, and it doesn't always have to be the way things have done, and there's creative solutions that might not necessarily be the way we've done things before.
And do you have any particular? I mean, you've been you have 4 kids. You've lived in this community for 21 years. One of the biggest
26.
26 years.
Got here in 91.
91. Yes, I couldn't do the math, so I'm unqualified to be running the city for sure. So you have the largest single expenditure in the city budget, I believe, is the police department, public safety.
Right.
What's your sense as a law-abiding citizen in Missoula of our public safety operation? Because you'll be taking that over if you got elected.
Right, and I think that they are the biggest piece of the budget, obviously,
right.
And
I think it's 29%.
And I think that that their wages have been addressed through union negotiations,
right.
Obviously from now in the future. I worry about the fact or the question if their equipment or their resources are being kept up to speed at the necessary rates. And so
right. I mean, there are some federal grants for that sort of thing that
right.
do come into the city budget. You wonder. Sometimes of the year you wonder if there's enough police out there. I mean, again, there's only 75 sworn officers.
Is that right?
Yeah. When you have a Grizz football game going on and
you
a
never
concert
feel like
going
enough.
on at Kettle House, and you might not, when the city's operating on all cylinders, that's not such a big, police force
right.
to cover 24/7 operation. Of course, then you're in a situation if you're going to be increasing, that area, with fixed income, where do you cut back? And those are the yins and yangs, sort of running the city. But by and large, you think we have a pretty good police operation here.
I do. I know some of the policemen personally, and I think that they seem happy with their jobs, and they're dedicated to providing the services that they do and keeping our community safe.
Of the businesses that you're meeting with as you start talking to different businesses, are there any that jump out that you admire and that you think are doing a good job, and folks that you feel like, hey, you know what, they're stepping up, they're responsible both to their workforce and to the community?
This isn't a group that I've met with, but the group that I work for, Cost Care, has done an amazing job at that. They have worked tirelessly to provide quality, affordable health care for Western Montana. We have clinics here and in Helena.
Mm-hmm.
And they have been a stepping stone for me personally to totally think outside the box like I've been talking about and
right.
come up with solutions to problems that everybody keeps telling us we can't do. And then we find ways around it that are feasible and easy, and we can implement them immediately.
So are you going to continue to work during this time?
During the election process,
Yes.
Yes.
Because like most working people here, including everybody, you need the money, right?
Well, I love my job too, so it's a double bonus.
That's wonderful. So our guest is Lisa Triepke. You're listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO. After this break, we're going to have our final moments with Lisa, and she could sum up for us what being mayor means to her and what the next steps are. Back after this. We are back. We're having quite a laugh here in the studio at my expense, which is usually how it goes down. It's okay. It's okay.
We should have a show that just covers what we talk about when we're not on the air.
When the mic is off?
Yeah, when the mic is off.
Lisa Triepke is our guest. Who is Lisa Triepke? Let's ask that question.
That's an important question. Who are you?
Well, I personally, I like I said, I have 4 kids, and I love to do the normal family stuff that you do, whether it's floating the river or all the things that Montana has to offer, camping, hiking. I like music festivals. I love the downtown, and I run races when I have to, and I'm told I have to.
You are. I've floated the river with you a few times. It's a fun trip with you.
Well,
and
thanks.
your brood.
Yeah, they're a dull moment.
I paddleboard while they float. Okay, remember that?
I do.
With jobs and running for mayor and 4 kids. What other? Do you have hobbies? Do you have a favorite TV show that you can't miss when it's on? Do you have an author you like to read? Is there? I mean, what informs you?
What informs me?
Yeah.
I watch the news on a limited basis,
right?
Because it seems to be pretty slanted. But I don't have cable, so we have Netflix and Hulu. And as far as favorite TV shows go, I kind of watch what the kids are on. And right now, that's Grey's Anatomy and Friday Night Lights.
By the way, did you ever watch The West Wing?
I did. Loved that show.
So Richard Schiff was in town this past week. He was the chief of staff on The West Wing?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
His niece was graduating from the U a couple weeks ago for the graduation, and he was in town. He loves Missoula.
Let me ask you this question while we're just talking. The 2,000-pound gorilla in Missoula is the University of Montana.
Right.
Right. And the city has to have a primary relationship with the university.
Right.
And you've worked at the university.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts about the camaraderie or the ability of the university and the city to create something even more special in this community?
I'm glad you asked that. I'm actually really excited about that. I'm in Leadership Missoula this year, and we had one of our sessions on campus, and Sheila Stearns spoke to the group, and she's somebody I truly admire. She's come into a position that is daunting, and she came into obviously declining enrollment and some other issues that she's trying to fix, and she's doing it in a fair and balanced way. And I really admire her, so I'm looking forward to working with her.
Yeah, because that's something that's often overlooked here. That this is a university town.
It is.
I don't know what Missoula would be like if the university packed up and moved to Great Falls, but it would certainly be a completely different community.
Be Yakima.
I guess it would be Yakima. But I think that's important. So let me get back to this. What are the every campaign sort of has a 3-legged stool, or what are the basic tenets of your campaign? What are you going to put forth to the voters over the next 5 months?
Mine would be, and we've talked about a couple of them, but the rising costs of living here, the affordability versus the livability. I think there's a huge difference in those two ideas, and to kind of balance that out so that, yes, we all love to live here, but it's becoming to the point where we can't afford to live here. So I'd like to address that, and the transparency clearly. And then the third one is term limits. And I'm not saying that because I'm running. I have always thought that nobody should be a mayor for life or have an unending stream of time in office. I think it leads to cronyism, and you don't have a fresh perspective on projects or processes. And so I think that term limits is...
So it's not going to be one. So what do you think the term limit ought to be for mayor?
I would say 2.
So 8 years. And
and you have enough time to get things done that you want, but it's also it could be time to give somebody a fresh perspective and continue on.
So if you run and win, you're going to limit yourself to 2 terms, even if there aren't term limits? Or?
I absolutely would.
Good. It's good to know.
How do people find out more about you and what you're doing with your campaign?
We have a website that's Triepke4, the number 4, mayor.com.
Spell that out for our listeners.
TRIEPKE, the number 4, mayor, MAYOR.com. And it's the same tagline on Facebook, and we have Instagram and Twitter coming up shortly. On the website, there's options for volunteering and contributions, and we will be updating that with issues. Again, we've spent the last couple of weeks hitting the ground running, so we're in a constant updating mode with that.
If people want to meet you, do you have things coming up over the next couple of weeks where they could meet you and introduce themselves?
We have some fundraisers coming up, some house parties, etc. And I think our goal is to have maybe every other week a set aside time at a public establishment where
and that'll all be on your website
Yep.
and all the other social media outlets for people who want to come shake your hand and get your autograph and explain to you how you ought to run the city.
Exactly.
Can come and talk to you.
Right, and we have a big weekend. We're right in the middle of a big weekend. This show
We
airs
are.
on Sunday. So.
Scott and I get to hang out together this weekend.
In Great Falls.
Yep.
Very exciting.
Yes, it is.
State lacrosse.
State lacrosse. Hellgate going for number 6.
Lisa, it's been great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
We wish you luck, and we hope that you spend the next 5 months of your life, living out, what you started out to do when you announced a few weeks ago.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great having
Pleasure.
you here. Arnie, I will see you next week.
Certainly, Scott. See you next week.
Okay. Thank you for listening to What Do You Know?
I can't wait for the next show, Scott.
I'm excited too, Arnie. If you'd like to suggest a guest, send me an email at scottrichmond@townsquaremedia.com. We'll see you next week. And thanks for listening to Newstalk KGVO,